Joining us now is Congressman Adam Schiff. He's a California Democrat. He's the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
Is there, first of all, any new evidence that you've seen about collusion between Trump associates and Russians during the election?
I can't go into the particulars of the investigation. I can say that on a daily basis we continue to get new information that's pertinent to our investigation. Indeed, just today got additional information that could be very relevant. But in terms of the contents of that, or whether it bears on the issue of collusion or coordination, or it bears on other aspects of the investigation, I'm not at liberty to discuss.
But that's the major thrust of the House Intelligence Committee investigation, whether or not there was any collusion. Is that right?
That's certainly one of the core issues that we're investigating. We're also looking at what was the U.S. government response to the hacking and dumping of information. What did the FBI do? What can we learn from this? How do we develop a better response to any subsequent attack? Because, of course, the intelligence communities have concluded this was not a one-off. The Russians are going to do this again. We also want to make sure that the assessment that was put out by the intelligence community, both in classified and unclassified form, was sound. It was based on the accurate intelligence that they got. So we're looking at the raw materials to make sure they reach the right conclusions.
And you're working in coordination with the FBI criminal investigation that James Comey announced has been taking place since July. You're trying to make sure that whatever you do doesn't interfere with that investigation. Is that right?
This is certainly a priority for the committee, and I think for the Senate Intelligence Committee as well, and that is, how do we conduct these two congressional investigations while the FBI is doing their own investigation, where we're not stepping on their toes, they're not stepping on ours? That is a lot easier said than done. It goes against the grain for the FBI to share much in terms of what they're investigating. But at a certain point, when we get information that we believe the FBI needs to chase down, we want to share it with them. We hope that the FBI will also coordinate with us to the degree that they're allowed to.
So you've come here, you just had a closed-door briefing meeting with your committee, right?
We did. We've actually had a couple hearings this week. We had a hearing yesterday on some of the urgent, what we call hotspots around the world. We also had a roundtable this morning. Neither of those were on Russia-related topics, but the committee continues to do its work.
It was these hearings, these meetings, behind closed doors, classified, chaired by the chairman, Devin Nunes, right?
Yes.
So are you getting back, despite all the controversy that has erupted over the past couple of weeks, is he still capable of doing the job? Because you called on him to recuse himself from the Russian meddling investigation.
Well, I did, and what my recommendation was is not that the chairman should step down from his chairmanship, but rather we ought to continue on the ordinary course of our business as we did today. But when it came to the White House investigation and the investigation of Russia and whatnot, that segment of the committee's work, very important segment, he ought to step aside from because of this difficulty in separating his role as a surrogate for the president and the committee role. Now, that's not a decision that the Speaker concurred with, didn't concur with my recommendation, at least for the time being. He will continue in that position as far as the Speaker is concerned. So we will work together as best we can. But I raised that issue because I thought it did put a cloud over the integrity of our investigation.
Is that cloud still there, or is it being removed?
Well, I think to the degree that the White House still won't explain its role in providing these materials to the chairman, to the degree that that still remains shrouded in secrecy, why did the White House want to hide its hand on this? That cloud persists. But nonetheless, we're not going anywhere. If we were to walk away from this investigation in the House, it would literally cut in half the resources devoted to the Russia investigation, and it's just too important that this go forward.
So he's seen this information, Devin Nunes, the chairman, the Republican chairman, that the White House made available to him, and you the other day, you've received this information. The rest of the committee, the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, they're about to get that to that information. When they see that information, and I know it's classified, will they conclude that Susan Rice, for example, President Obama's former national security advisor, did something wrong in unmasking the names of American citizens who were incidentally caught up in surveillance activities by the U.S. government against foreigners?
Well, you know, as you probably know, I can't discuss the contents of what I saw at the White House. I can say that we did make the request. I made the request that those materials be shared with the entire House Intelligence Committee and our Senate counterpart. We understand from one of the responsible agencies, they're fine with that. We think that will go forward. I expect that will be fairly imminent. And I think, frankly, that's the process that should have taken place from the beginning. If anyone in the White House had a concern about any of these materials, they should have been shared and not gone through this charade that we saw over the last 2 weeks. In terms of the broader issue of incidental collection, I can't comment on anyone who was involved in masking or unmasking any materials, but I can say that you would expect in the course of listening to foreigners, talking to foreigners, that they might be discussing who the next president of the United States might be, or they might be discussing issues involving Russia, or issues involving China, or issues of national significance in which prominent U.S. people might be mentioned. Now, in the ordinary course of business, those names are masked, even though when you read the reports you might know exactly who they're talking about. But there are times where it's important for one of our national security officials to say, in order to evaluate the significance of this, I would like to know who the person is. The agency ultimately makes that decision to unmask. And I think what people are conflating, because the White House wants it conflated, is the decision to unmask so that national security official can view a document is not equivalent to leaking it to the public. And it's certainly not equivalent of saying that this is wiretapping or surveillance of Mr. Trump or his team when he was candidate Trump. So I think to that degree that people are making that suggestion, again, it's an effort to say, don't look at the Russia investigation, don't look at the ties to the Trump
But you and Chairman Nunes wrote a letter asking for more information about the unmasking of names of American citizens because you were clearly concerned, right?
Well, we did that as a part of our ordinary oversight responsibilities. That's something that we do quite often. If there's ever a concern raised about whether the minimization procedures are being used right, whether names are being properly masked, that's what we look at. And the fact that we made that request and we still have that strange interlude with the White House after that, you have to say, what prompted that? What was the urgency there when we've already asked for materials about incidental collection? And I have to think the urgency was created at that Monday hearing when James Comey said not only there was no truth to the president's claim that he was surveilled or wiretapped or what have you, but also when the FBI director said that the Trump campaign team was under an FBI investigation. I think this was the response to that rather breathtaking hearing.
Let me just be precise. Have you seen any evidence at all that Susan Rice, the former president's national security advisor, did anything wrong, whether illegal or unethical, in seeking to unmask the names of American citizens?
You know, I can't, again, speak to any specific persons or whether there are indications in classified materials. I can say this. We are just beginning to look at the issue of incidental collection. I haven't seen anything that indicates that there was some effort to surveil or wiretap candidate Trump and his team. There's nothing to justify the tweets that he sent out. But we will be more than happy to review any concerns that are raised about incidental collection. But what the American people need to understand is that encompasses often just talking about a person. That's incidental collection. That's a far cry from what is being suggested here by the president, that he was the target of wiretapping and eavesdropping.
So do you think the White House now is simply trying to distract the American public's attention from the main thrust of your investigation, the Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential election?
I think there are a few things going on. There is, in the first instance, a strong desire by the White House that we lose our focus, that we not pursue the investigation of Russia, particularly as it might impact the Trump campaign. I think that's priority number one for the president and the administration. I think there have been pre-existing concerns among many civil libertarians about a different issue, and that is the issue of whether incidental collection and the minimization procedures are adequate. And I think that the Trump administration and their supporters are using this pre-existing concern as a way to drive attention away from the Russia investigation. And then you have a third element, which is, I think, very appealing to the Breitbart crowd, and that is a continuing attack on Susan Rice, or several, to describe information accurately as it had been presented to her by the intelligence community. Now, the intelligence community had gotten it wrong about the early hours in Benghazi through no fault of Susan Rice's. But nonetheless, she seems to be a perennial target for the hard right, and I think that is also playing a role here.
Would it be appropriate to call her to testify before your committee?
You know, again, I can't comment on the content, but if she or anybody else has testimony that's relevant to the Russia investigation, it'd certainly be appropriate to bring her in. If she or anybody else has information pertinent to any concerns over minimization or whatnot, she's also welcome to come in. But again, you know, I don't want people to infer, as I think that my friends on the hard right would like, the fact that I won't discuss classified information is not meant to imply anything. And I find it more than ironic that some of the same people who are so vociferous in condemning leaks of classified information are condemning me for not leaking information about these classified documents.
I know you got to run it and vote very quickly. Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, are they already scheduled to appear before your committee?
You know, we don't have dates yet on our witnesses, but we've certainly made a lot of progress. The chairman and I have exchanged witness lists. I think we are in agreement on bringing in both the witnesses that we want, the witnesses he wants. Prior to doing that, we need to get the documents from these witnesses so that we'll understand, and from third parties, what questions we want to ask. Obviously, some of these folks we may only get one crack at. We need to be prepared, and we're not going to allow ourselves to be jammed because the witnesses might want to come in before we're ready to question them. But we do seem to be back on track in terms of identifying the witnesses and moving forward with the investigation.
Is Michael Flynn the only potential witness seeking immunity?
Well, you know, he's certainly the only one whose lawyers talked publicly about it, a highly irregular process. I think some of the commentary about that has been quite accurate. That's not generally how a defense counsel operates in advertising to the public. So we bring, I think, a very healthy skepticism to that request for immunity. There's also a lot that we can find out about the circumstances involving Mr. Conversation with Ambassador Kislyak, with his dishonesty with respect to that conversation that's been reported, without having to grant him or anyone else immunity. And obviously we want to pursue those other leads before we make any kind of decision like that.
I know you got to run, Congressman Adam Schiff.